We know that even though your life seems a lot like everybody else's, that inside you have thoughts that you haven't shared with anybody else. There's a secret part inside yourself that wants to know the truth. And now you can with UNICULT. UNICULT is a collaborative effort dedicated to the promotion of joy. You too can be really happy. UNICULT, a cult you can trust.
Sermon today was chosen by a randomizer wheel, and I sourced topics from some of my fellow UNICULT members because I was not sure what to talk about today. And I put them all on a wheel, and I spun the wheel, and we have arrived at our topic today, which was suggested by Flip Top Box. And we are talking today about the concept of rebirth, which is one of those topics that when I look at it and I think about it and I say, that's a pretty big topic for 20 minutes. But I guess my sermons go longer than 20 minutes sometimes. And so I am grateful to present this topic because the first thing I thought about when I thought about the topic of rebirth is that UNICULT was founded and based and springs from this idea of rebirth. One of our holidays, if you have a uni planner and you look at the front of the uni planner, one of our holidays in UNICULT is the day that Unicole survived Zir's unaliving attempt. And that's kind of a rebirth day, right? And from that low place, from that dark period, from that place of depression and not being sure what to do in this world that throws a lot at us, came a rebirth. And all these ideas and all these concepts and putting them together in a way that allowed Unicole to live on this planet and allowed them to then share with the rest of us and for all of us to then come along in different parts of our lives and add to those teachings and grow those teachings and talk about it and refine it. These ideas in UNICULT have been refined by Unicole talking about them for the last 10 years. They've been talked about by us for the last number of years. All the trolls that have come in and tried to talk about these ideas have been refining it. And so from that one initial rebirth, this whole system and this movement and this spirituality and this just lens through which we all look at the world has blossomed into something so amazing that we sit here today in just the most joyous harmony with each other, celebrating this commune. And it all comes from the seed of that initial rebirth and everything that came from that and that lowest moment. I know that I joined UNICULT at a pretty low time in my life as well. And so I'll relate it a little by speaking personally. I found UNICULT in 2019 in the spring, and about 4 or 5 months prior to that, I had gotten a divorce. I was coming out of a 4-year marriage and a 6 or 7 year relationship. And after the divorce, I was living on my own for the very first time. I'd always lived either with family or I'd lived with partners. And I was on my own, and I was recently divorced. And just trying to figure out what to do with my life, and it was so unbearable because the loneliness was so unfamiliar. And I ended up having to go into inpatient. And I went away in inpatient for a week to disconnect and try to make sense of everything. And a number of months later was when I saw the Vice documentary for the first time. And that resonated so much. And that was one of my lower moments. And it has been a rebirthing process since then. And I think a lot of us can relate to that. A lot of us can probably find points of our lives where we found maybe UNICULT or some other spirituality, and it helped pull us out of that. And rebirth is such an important part of UNICULT that one of the fun things that we did on the retreat in Colorado last year, when we went down to the reservoir where Unicole had Zier's attempt, and we are in the water, and this is a very spiritual place now for UNICULT. It's a very important space for the beginning of this movement, and we all did baptisms in that water, and it felt like a very joyful moment of really reclaiming a space. I can't speak for Unicole, but that's the energy that I felt. And we all did baptisms, which, as someone who was raised Catholic, I understand is this, a rebirth, coming back into the world, ready to take everything and washing away everything that you have gone through, or that if you're just a baby, you haven't experienced, and giving you that clarity and that peace of mind and embodying you as spirit. And that was so beautiful. And so rebirth is so important here in Unicole. What is an awakening? What is an awakening to the way that things are in 3D reality and seeing things for what they are? It is a spiritual rebirth. It's a mental rebirth. We are constantly shifting into a higher timeline. What is that? That is a rebirth. Waking up in this amazing, more beautiful timeline where Uniacres is happening, where uni babies have happened, where our dreams and Unicole's dreams are coming to a reality. What is that? It's a rebirth from whatever happened before. And as we acknowledge that we have come into this phase of our life, or this new understanding, or this new sense of self, or gathering these modalities and tools to help us carry forward in a life that's more aligned with who we are, I think it's incredibly important that we acknowledge that in rebirth, there is the end, there is a death, there is a conclusion of some part of our life. We may see it in a spiritual sense. We may see it as an ego death. We may let go of the ego. We may experience a long, hard night of letting go of the ego, of confronting the person we are against the person we want to be, and letting go of that strong attachment to who we think we are or who we're told to be, and letting that go and experiencing that death. And it's important to acknowledge the work and energy that takes. We may move on to a different part of our life, and we may be moving away from something that is painful, from something that is not aligned anymore. We may be moving out of a very hard situation, and it is still important to acknowledge whatever that meant and whatever good came from it, because no matter how hard a situation is, how unaligned some of the actions we take or the people that we were might be, we can still look at that death, we can look at that conclusion, and we can have ourselves a bit of mourning to recognize the end, embrace the end, and remind ourselves the good that came from it. I have moved out of situations that have not been good for me. I can look back now and mourn that and realize it put me on the path to where I am right now. And for that I am grateful. I have left relationships that were not healthy for me, that were toxic for me. I can mourn that death now and go back and say, well, it taught me this lesson. It brought me to this point. It allowed this rebirth. I gained this skill. I gained this understanding. I gained this strength. I was reborn out of that into something else. And so for that, I am grateful to the low point. I am grateful for the loneliness I experienced. I am grateful for going into inpatient because when I came out of it, I was ready to be by myself. I am grateful for my divorce because it allowed me to realize that I was not acting like the person I was, and I was not treating people I love in a way that was aligned with my true heart, and I would not have known that, or I would not have known that sooner had it not be for that end and that rebirth. So I am grateful for that end. I am grateful for that conclusion. I am grateful for the death of that relationship and the rebirth of that relationship into something that is more aligned, because me and my ex-wife are still so incredibly close. We're just better aligned. And so we acknowledge the death, we acknowledge the conclusion, and we feel gratitude for it because we see where we're at right now. And when we have that rebirth and we feel all these things that are coming in, that is where we can find the courage and we can find the strength to surrender to the divine. What is rebirth if not giving it to Uni, giving it to your something higher, just laying on your back like you just did 30 minutes of yoga and you're exhausted and you're tired and you're just, okay, let's just, what do you got? What do you got, Uni? I am just going to go with it. Let's get into the flow. Let's get into life. I'm ready for the rebirth. Let's go. It is... We surrender and accept what is happening. We surrender and accept the good things that are coming into our life. We go with the flow when we follow our whims and we follow our joy. That is the path to joy. The path to joy is, in essence, the path to joy is this roadmap for a rebirth. Your low point is the cynicism. That's the start. It's the same. We're all going through a hard time and we're all cynical at that low point. When we do the rebirth, then we're there. We're at the time and attention and dedication. We're doing the arise steps. We're going through the whole path to joy. That is your roadmap for a rebirth process. And if you just allow your something higher, be it the spirit of Uni, God, whatever you consider the divine, and you allow that to embody your spirit, you can follow that path so much easier. And you can experience your emotions, because when we say joy here in UNICULT, when we say joy here in what we teach, We're not talking about bypassing. We're not talking about being naive or ignorant to the way the world is. We're talking about experiencing the whole spectrum of emotions. We're talking about feeling every emotion and just acknowledging that what's authentic. And as long as we're feeling our authentic emotions, the emotions that are aligned with what we're feeling and where we are, that is joyful. That will never lead us down a negative path, because every negative emotion, as long as it's authentic, is not a detrimental emotion. Authentic emotions can always teach us something, and authentic emotions and feeling that and following our joy is the fuel that pushes us forward through a rebirthing process. As we surrender to the divine and allow it to flow through us and go with that flow and feel our emotions and acknowledge that it's happening, realize what we're going through. And that's when we come to things like, what do you do during your rebirth? What do you do when you realize this is going on, when you've surrendered to the divine and you look around and say, oh, this is how the world really is. Oh, this is the person that I really am. When you look in the mirror and you see a more authentic self looking back at you and you realize you're going through this rebirth process, how do you keep chugging along? What do you do when you're surrendering? That is where we've had some amazing sermons lately about journaling. Ghosty and Unicole have talked so wonderfully about journaling. That's where journaling can be so important. Get yourself a little rebirth journal and jot down, I feel reborn today. Today I felt the spirit of Uni flow through me, and this is how it made me feel. And I went around the world, and this is how I felt today. I have this little journal that this sermon is kind of written down on, and it's wonderful. I think writing that down and keeping this diary as we're reborn into a more authentic version of ourselves is so amazing, and it gives you something to look back on. And go back and listen to Ghosty's thoughts on journaling, and go back and listen to Unicole's thoughts on journaling. It is so important, and I think it is a great tool for your ascension and a great tool for your rebirth. And I'm just kind of use ascension and rebirth kind of interchangeably, because, you know, if we're reborn and we're coming into a better version of ourselves, like, ascension's gonna happen, right? And I think another thing that really goes hand in hand with coming out of that dark period and coming in to this more actualized sense of yourself and learning how to survive in this world and following your joy and following your whims and letting the divine flow through you is gratitude. Acknowledging it, thanking it, being grateful in the morning. I know there's a part in the Vice documentary where Unicole says that every day they wake up and they go outside and they face the sun and they say, thank you for this day. And just in that moment, showing just that gratitude to the world, to spirit, to source, we are opening up more and more channels to let the divine flow through us and let the rebirth just happen. Just let it happen. Source and spirit of Uni will not steer us wrong ever, because it is 100% aligned with joy. It is 100% aligned with harmony and peace and our true selves, and it is guided by our highest self. And so gratitude helps open those channels more. It helps us feel it more. Gratitude just gets those receptors open, because when we show gratitude and we acknowledge that great things are happening to me, then we can feel it easier. And so whether that's getting up in the morning and going outside and thanking the world for all that it gives us and for this opportunity to experience this rebirth, or whether it's late at night in your prayer to whatever you pray to and thanking it, and then receiving that energy and receiving that hope as you sleep in the astral plane or the dream realm or whatever you conceptualize. Gratitude, acknowledgement, allows us to continue to receive and helps us to maintain a practice of feeling the divine and surrendering to the divine and letting rebirth happen. And gratitude, journaling, acknowledgement, surrender. These are all the things that we have in our tool belt once we feel that we're coming out of that dark place and we acknowledge, wow, okay, I needed that low point. I needed that rock bottom, so to speak. So now I can be reborn. I can ascend up further. And then we have those tools and we can keep moving forward. And the last thing I want to say about it is, because I know sometimes with the way the world is, and there's a lot of influences out there, and there's a lot of media, and there's a lot of news, and there are a lot of forces there in the world that will tell you the opposite. Cynicism is a rough thing. It is a rough thing, and it is persistent, and it is out there. But rebirth, ascension, coming into yourself, however you want to think about this, is always possible. There is never a time in your life where rebirth isn't possible. Because rebirth and ascension comes from the divine. It comes from your higher self. Your higher self is never going to abandon you, no matter how low you feel, or how you feel about the state of the world, or how you wake up in the morning, or where you feel you're at in life. You are not going to be abandoned by your higher self, even if you can't feel it in the moment. Even if you don't feel connected to Source, that doesn't mean Source isn't connected to you. A higher self does not ever leave its connection to us. Source, God, Spirit of Uni, does never stop watching over us. So a rebirth, ascension, connection is always possible. No matter how you feel, no matter where you're at, no matter what's going on, no matter what's happened, no matter what drama is going on, no matter what hardships are going on, no matter what suffering you may be experiencing and trying to get out of, you are still connected to Source. You are still connected to your higher self, because it is always connected to you, and it is never going to sever that connection. And that is, in my opinion, the essence of hope. Is knowing that no matter what happens, there is always that connection there. Even if I wake up and I don't feel it. We can always reconnect. We can always be reborn. We can always move forward. We can always ascend. Because our higher self and Spirit of Uni is always connected to us. Will never, ever leave us behind. Will never leave us abandoned. Never. That's not how it works. And that to me is hope in its most divine form. And that is our sermon for